action cures inaction. So when we get stuck, we are stuck in the thinking about the doing. What we need to do is just get stuck into the doing. What are the three things that I need to get done today? Three things that are going to move the needle. Don't worry about the 52 items on your to-do list. Once you start getting in and doing the doing and you get out of the thinking, that helps hugely in getting unstuck.
Casey, so nice to meet you. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
You too, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Would you be able to just give a bit of a background on yourself and the work you do, just so our listeners, before we get into it, can learn a little bit more about you?
Sure. So I am a health journalist by trade, meaning I did a journalism degree and then specialised in health pretty much before I'd even finished uni. I knew that that was all that I wanted to write and speak about. Usually when you become a journalist, you get sort of forced into a cadetship with one of the big mastheads or one of the big broadcasters. And there they'll get you to do a bit of everything, bit of sport, bit of politics, bit of current affairs, bit of news. And I knew from, as I said, before I'd even finished my degree, that healthcare, medicine was all I wanted to do. So I was very lucky. I left university. I grew up in Perth. I moved to Sydney, and I ended up working under a guy called Dr. Norman Swan, and he is Australia's sort of foremost medical broadcaster, a doctor by trade, a paediatrician back in the day who has many people listening will remember him from COVID. He was kind of the guy that everybody turned to that we could trust to sort of really give us the lay of the land as to what was going on with COVID. So I spent 6 years working under him, building his businesses, and that was the best education that I could have ever possibly asked for. So fast forward to today, and I guess I consider myself a health educator, but I just do that one-to-many rather than one-to-one. So I write books, I do TV shows, I speak, lots of keynotes for corporates, lots of conferences, and show up on socials and try to educate and empower Australians to better navigate the healthcare system and to become better advocates for themselves within it.
Yeah, amazing. And what got you interested in like the healthcare side in the first place? Like what led you down that?
I just remember when I was little, there was two things that fascinated me most. I had this huge sort of thirst for knowledge. And the two things that fascinated me most was anything medicine related, anything medical, and people. I had a sort of a colourful upbringing, and I remember my dad, when I was really little, he had this woman come out and stay with us from the UK. She was doing her PhD in something to do with the role of group therapy in adult education. And we had all of these men who were HIV positive, and this is 1988. So, very much in that zone of, HIV or AIDS being a death sentence, not at all what it is today. And there being a lot of stigma associated. People wouldn't shake hands with somebody who was HIV positive, let alone have them in their house, or any. So I remember she came and we had this group of HIV positive men at our house, and partially the reason that I remember is because she wrote a thesis about it. And in her thesis, she wrote that 4-year-old Casey would come and sit in the group with these men and readily take turns asking questions. Like, I was just fascinated by these men and their stories and their illness and their lives. And when I read she sent me a little blurb from her thesis, and I was like, oh, that is so fascinating. So when I was like 4 years old, I was already kind of who I was going to grow up to be. I've always had a million questions, and I still have a million questions now. It's why I became a journalist, so that I would have somewhere to put all of the questions. And so I've forever been fascinated by both health and wellbeing, and also ill health or illness, disease, disability, and mainly the impact that those things have on people's lives. I still think that in 2025, we're still really focused on treating the disease or the disability rather than the person with it. And that fascinates me. So I like to think that I sort of play at the interface of clinical and communication. So what can delivering better communication deliver better outcomes and results to people. So I'm forever thinking about how could we do this thing called healthcare better.
Yeah, I mean that's so important, and I can imagine there's probably not a huge amount of people, out there getting those, messages in that way as vocal as you are, and it's obviously needed. It's something that probably we can't talk about enough. We can't do more in, and we need so much, support. And yeah, and I love that story that it's sort of like that through line of it was your calling, I guess. Like at 4 years old, those, it's just like really cool when you see stories like that of people that ended up going, found that path, followed what they were really meant to do. So it's super cool.
Yeah, thank you. And look, I wish that I was savvy enough in high school to know that I wanted to be a doctor and that I had put my head down and my bum up and like studied hard and got the grades. I just was not mature enough yet. I was too focused on being a delinquent in high school. I was not ready to really focus. I just wasn't mature enough. And now I think, oh God, what a shame, because who knows, maybe I could have gone on to study medicine.
Mm.
And also not being a clinician is a real strength. When I'm speaking to audiences, I'm saying to them, I am just like you. I am a particularly health literate person. I study it deeply. I love it immensely, but I am not a clinician. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a dietitian. I am just like you, navigating the healthcare system and trying to show people what I'm learning along the way. And I do think that there's some power in that.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think, yeah, like we can look back on those things, but if you went down that path, you probably wouldn't have, or may not have, ended up going and speaking out as much about it and building the platform that you're building and all that sort of thing. And like you're saying, I think it's so important to be able to communicate on that relatable level, not just hearing another doctor talking about it, someone they can see is one of us. And I guess that's like similar for me with the mental health, journey I was on, falling into advocating about it. And, I'm not from a psychology background, but I think in that space of advocacy, it's important to have people that are, talking about it from that standpoint.
I agree. And I'll say that healthcare is one of those, or health and well-being more broadly, as you'll know all too well. In the world of influence in that space, in the 20 years since I became a health journalist, almost 20 years, in the beginning, my job was to translate really dense science to the public. Now, because of social media, we have a lot more experts that can communicate really well, and they're very influential, which is amazing because we need those expert voices to be loudest. And as you'll know, there are plenty of influencers out there that don't have any degrees, that share, dangerous information that's not helpful, information that is purely sales focused, fear tactics. So we have the good, the bad, and the ugly in this industry, if you want to call it that, just like there is in any other. And so you're so right. And I think that where people like you and I are able to really lend some value is that we understand the clinical side enough to know when we're straying outside of our lane and into territory that is not for us and that is for experts. And so I work with some of the best doctors and health experts in the country on almost a daily basis. I am forever deferring to them. I try really hard not to stray out of my lane. I'm not giving medical advice. I can't. I'm not a clinician. So being able to straddle those two things, lived experience and some professional experience, and then to be able to communicate that, I think it's so important that we have those voices, because there are some voices out there that are loud and have a lot of power and a lot of influence, and that share things that are not necessarily evidence-based, and that's a
Mm.
concern.
Yeah, definitely. As many positives as have come from that, the same amount of negatives have probably come, and it can be so overwhelming. And I mean, what would you say to someone that is trying to navigate that? How can you find within all the noise what is right, what's credible, what is maybe not so credible? It can be so overwhelming for people.
It absolutely can. I say in my new book, Next of Kin, when you are starting off, you've got a few sources of helpful information to you. One is the experts, so the experts that you're working with, saying to them, are there particular websites, particular papers, particular studies that you would recommend we look at this point? They will be well across the literature and they will be able to point you in the right direction. So, for example, as you said, you can get so lost in the minefield of how many studies there are, how many academic papers there are, and they might be able to say to you, well, there's this great meta-analysis, meaning a study of studies, that really pulls together all of the evidence that we know thus far about your condition. Here's the link to the paper. Like, they can circumvent it for you. They're across it. So asking them is really important. Then I suppose if you want to start looking into the evidence yourself, there are definitely some sites that I would recommend over others. And usually they're the big providers. So the World Health Organization, the CDC, if you're in the US, if you're in Australia, it might be something like Health Direct or Better Health Victoria. So lots of those kind of big government-based organizations. But then there are also some condition-specific organizations too that do really, really great work. So the Heart Foundation, if you're dealing with something cardiac related, the Cancer Council or Cancer Australia, if you've got cancer. And it keeps breaking down from there. So I do a full list in the book of sources that I would recommend. I've also built a companion site, which has all of the trusted sites for carers, nationally, state-based, and by condition, so that people don't have to go looking as hard for things as I did when I was thrust into the role of becoming my dad's carer.
Yeah. So we'll actually, while you mention that, we'll talk about your book as we go forward. But where can people go if they want to find that link? We'll put this in the show notes, but just while you mention it, if anyone listening wants to find that.
Yes. So in Australia, the book is out in all good bookstores now, and online, so Amazon, Booktopia. In the US, it comes out on the 13th of October. Looking at my calendar to check, comes out on the 13th of October. The UK, and Canada and New Zealand all come out between now and then. In big bookstores as well as Amazon online, the list is at the back of the book, and then on the companion site is KIIN.club, CLUB. It's essentially a virtual care club, and on it I've tried to pull everything that I needed when I was a carer into one space so that people can come and find things without too much trouble.
Amazing. Well, yeah, I'll have that in the show notes. So anyone listening, make sure to check that out, buy the book, and I'm sure that will be super helpful for so many people. Like you're saying, you've taken a lot of you've done the groundwork, to find that. Are you able to, tell us about your experience being a carer, about how the book came about, and that whole journey?
Absolutely. So I got a call from my dad in June 2021 saying that he had been diagnosed with mesothelioma, which is cancer from exposure to asbestos. It is a fatal, incurable, rapidly moving cancer. So it's bad news. It's bad news, and it's not much fun as a diagnosis, particularly for dad. It's called mesothelioma because the cancer is in the mesothelium, so the lining of the organs. And there's a couple of places that it will often be, but the majority of the time it is in the pleura of the lung. So if you imagine kind of a fishnet stocking around your lung that sort of holds everything in place, the cancer is essentially in the net of the stocking. And so what tends to happen is that as the tumors expand, the lung capacity decreases, gets squeezed. And so the poor person with the condition has less and less and less lung capacity and really struggles to breathe. So it's a really cruel and awful cancer, and a very scary diagnosis for dad. I was living in Sydney at the time, had been for 15 years, had grown up in Perth, as I said. So dad was in Perth, I was in Sydney, I was in Wagga Wagga actually when we got that call, and very quickly we got on a plane. I think our plan was just to come back, get him through a few appointments, work out the lay of the land, and then we would work out what to do next. And bearing in mind it's June 2021, so Australia is in very much in the grips of COVID.
Mm.
And we're so lucky that we got on a plane when we did, because we landed at midday, and at midday the then Premier of Western Australia held a press conference saying that he was shutting the borders behind us at midnight indefinitely.
Mm.
And so we got in by the skin of our teeth. We were very, very lucky. And because we couldn't leave after the borders had been shut, we had sort of inadvertently moved back to Perth. And it worked out to be wonderful. It wasn't without its challenges, getting our friends to pack up our apartment, put all of our stuff into storage. But in terms of being here with Dad, Dad had been given 6 to 12 months to live, and he ended up getting 2.5 years. So we got a lot longer with him than what was promised to us. And there are so many healthcare professionals who have, and other just very kind-hearted people who have said to me, the reason that he got as long as he did is because of the care that you were able to provide.
Mm.
And I don't know whether that's true. It's a lovely thing to say. I'd like to think that there's some truth to that. Certainly when we would have nurses come to the house, I couldn't tell you how many of them said to me, we see people all day, every day on their own. You have no idea how lucky he is to have someone like you who is always here with him. And somebody asked me in an interview the other day whether or not that move, that jump to be there for him was out of duty. And I said it didn't feel like duty. It felt like compulsion. Like there was no, I don't even think I said to my husband, can we please get on a plane and go back to Perth? It was like, we're just going.
Mm.
And bless him, he is just the kindest, nicest, most amazing man. I really married very, very well. There was just no question. Like, in the same way that I would like to think that if the shoe was on the other foot and it was one of his parents, we would do the exact same thing. Nothing felt more important in that moment. And I do just have to own the privilege around that, in that not everybody would be able to get a family of 4 on a plane and across the country. Not everybody would be able to survive. Not every family would be able to survive on one wage. My husband is a teacher. We were very lucky. We were able to survive on his wage. And I could really take a step back at work to be there with Dad. My children were very young. They weren't sort of embedded in the school system yet. So I suppose we were well set up to be able to make a decision like that, but I just want to own the privilege around that, because not everybody listening will be able to make a decision like that. For a lot of people in this country, care is not a choice. You need to care and work, and there's no other option.
Mm.
And so I was very, very fortunate. And look, I have always written to make sense of my world, my thoughts, my feelings. When I was younger, I could never find what I needed in terms of other people going through, showing me going through their hard things. And so I started writing about mine, and I published a book back in 2021 that was 16 life lessons I wished I'd learned sooner. And I've kind of continued that theme, is that nobody seemed to be talking about what happens at the other end of life when somebody is struck down with disease or disability or death, and you as the next of kin are there to pick up the pieces. We write our name down all the time on medical forms. We write other people's name down as our next of kin, as our emergency contact, and we never expect the phone to ring. So this book is about what happens when the phone does ring and you answer.
Totally. Well, thank you for sharing that. And like you're saying, it's something that we don't, I guess, like we don't like to think about it, and we've got so many other things we're focusing on that, we never plan for these things to happen. It reminds me, a little bit about what you were saying, how, he lived for 2.5 years, a lot longer, and having your care. And I really believe that. Like during COVID, my uncle, who was like probably like a second father to me, he had motor neuron disease for 10 years. So he'd, already done pretty well with it. And out of nowhere, my auntie got lung cancer, and they were like so close, and couldn't be separated. And everyone was
Mm,
saying to her, "You've got to put him in a home," and she would refuse to, and she would be having, he was heavy, she'd have to be lifting him in and out of bed, but she just was like, "I'm not doing it." And when
hmm
she got that diagnosis, he had to go into a home, and the level that he of like how rapidly he deteriorated was just crazy compared to where he was at.
hmm
So just seeing that firsthand, I think it really highlighted that about how important it really is to have that. If you can, like you're saying, obviously, not
Yes.
everyone can have it, but just seeing that experience was definitely eye opening.
Yes, and I'm sure that you would be interested in the blue zones, as we call them. So these places around the world where people live for longer, and there's many
Mm,
more centenarians, they call them. So people over the age of 100. And these are places like Okinawa in Japan and Ikaria in Greece, and Sardinia in Italy, and there's a place in Costa Rica. And what we see when we look at those blue zones is that there's not an aged care facility in sight. They don't
mm,
do that. They do intergenerational caring. And interestingly, Singapore has just been named as a Blue Zone 2.0, so one of the newer blue zones. And one of the things that their government has done is they pay families to stay within a small radius of their family. So if you have aging parents and you stay, I don't know what the actual distance is, it's something like a kilometer. If you stay living within 1 kilometer of your aging parents so that you are geographically well positioned to continue delivering care to them, the government pays you a fee every year for you to do that. And I think that those types of things are so simple, like mind-bogglingly simple, but
mm.
so powerful. And we really do have this very outsourced model of care in this country. And in the US and in so many, and in the UK, so many of these kind of very developed Western countries, we really don't do that intergenerational care piece very well. And it's really interesting at the moment. The papers here are flooded with headlines around the bank of mum and dad. So people, our age, who are borrowing money from their parents to be able to afford a home because cost of living is out of control, cost of real estate is out of control. And from what I understand, many of those cultures that are doing this really well, they do the same thing, but the expectation on both sides is that those elders will absolutely be cared for. So part of the trade-off for them putting their capital into the family's care jurisdiction, helping them buy a bigger home, is with a view to be able to care for their aging parents moving forward. And I think we've skipped that bit. And part of my concern around all of these headlines and seeing the bank of mum and dad is that for many people in this country who are lucky enough to own their own home, which luckily lots of boomers do, that money needs to be kept to put them into care. So the refundable accommodation deposit is what they call it, the amount that you have to pay to go into a home, and there's all different models. But generally speaking, in Australia, on average, it's almost $500,000. Like, it's not small change. That's,
Mm.
the value of lots of people's homes, let alone having any money to live on. And so, I think I'm not sure that we're approaching aging and care right. And I think we need to take a really good look at how we do that, because I think you're right. I think that your uncle would have absolutely gone downhill quickly. That makes perfect sense to me. And I acknowledge that not all families are in a position to be able to care. My hope is that the book inspires a few more people to step up when they get the call.
Yeah. Are they? Is the Australian government doing more to improve this, or no?
We
Not really.
have we no, we have two carer payments, a carer payment and a carer allowance, and combined they are like, I want to say, half of what's a job seeker. I think that's what it's called, the dole, what the dole is. So these
Right.
are like tiny amounts of money being paid to people who are carers, and that is, it's completely unsustainable for them to be able to live on. We've got big aged care reforms coming in November in this country. I don't see anything in there for carers. I
Mm.
know that it's all patient focused in the hope that that alleviates some of the pressure on carers, but I don't see anything in there that's dedicated specifically to carers. And just for context, so the global healthcare industry, the paid, the services, the healthcare industry that we use, that we pay for, is worth $9.8 trillion, or it was in 2021. If we paid for the unpaid care that carers provide, just at minimum wage, so not paying them well, just covering them for their time, that would be worth another $11 trillion. So the unpaid portion of the care economy is actually worth more than the paid portion of healthcare. So we are so reliant
Mm.
on the unpaid love and care of family members. And I just don't think that that's good enough. I think we need to do a much, much better job of supporting them. And that's part of the
Mm.
work that I'm trying to do in the world, because it's just not good enough to ask families to continue to do that just out of love, fueled by caffeine, bumbling around the system.
Mm.
That's not fair to them. But it delivers good results, and that the data would support that, in that, when people can stay home for longer and be cared for, that they do tend to do better. We do see kind of a sharp decline once people are in care institutions. So yeah, there's work to be done for sure.
And what are some of the reasons why they're not in any rush to change this? Why is it staying the same? Is it just it's the status quo? It's a huge time investment, huge cost. Like, what are some of the reasons why they're not?
That's a great question, and I wish I knew the answer. There are much, much bigger, brighter, better minds than mine that are working on that. I mean, I think just based on that statistic that I gave you, it is inconceivable to think that governments would be able to cover that cost. We can't more than double the cost of healthcare. We're already at more than 10% of gross domestic product, both in Australia and globally. And so that needs to come down rather than go up. So we can't double it. That's just, we'd sink the economy.
Yeah.
So I understand that it's very, very nuanced. And I think it's really critical. We are lurching towards this aged care crisis. We've got more older people than we do younger people. That will only continue to get worse. We need younger people to look after the older people. Care as a profession is not lucrative. It's not. Sure, if you become a doctor or a specialist, absolutely, but nurses are not paid well enough. Aged care workers are not paid well enough. They're not. It's not a profession that people are drawn to. So we see, low skilled, lots of migrant workers coming in to be able to deliver care, and we need to upskill them, and we need to empower them, and we need to make care feel like the valuable, revered profession that it is. In
Mm.
this,
Mm.
we need to do the same with education and childcare, and we're certainly trying to make some strides towards that. But we know that care is the most important work that we will ever do, and we are still placing the vast majority of our healthcare budget right downstream. So once people start to become really ill is when they start to cost the most. And
Yeah.
that's where we're investing all of our hard-earned money. Whereas if we were to invest earlier into more prevention, more early detection, more support earlier on in the piece, I think we could probably alleviate some of the spend down here. So I don't know why we're not doing a better job of that. I think that my hope is that will change in the future. But at the moment, I think the aged care reforms are coming about because they're realizing that we are lurching towards this cliff of aged care that is going to be completely unsustainable, because we know that people cost the most in the last year of life. Makes sense, right? The year before your car dies is exactly the same, or the year before your
Mm.
fridge dies is exactly the same. And I'm not advocating against that, because people will pay everything they've got for very small increments in extension of time. We all would. But I do think that there's a better way. And my hope is
Yeah.
that as I step into more conversations like this, that we can start to raise some of the awareness, and that I will have the opportunity to start to understand some of those metrics and levers better, and start to work with the people that I have no doubt are trying to find some solutions.
Yeah, definitely. But it really doesn't make a lot of sense that there's not more being done. And I guess it's similar to, mental health. There's a lot of really good reactive services out there. There's
Mm.
nowhere near enough preventative, and I don't know what the percentage is, but I think like 70 or
Yeah.
80% of the money goes into all the reactive services, but there's nowhere near enough of a push of how do we actually be preventative?
Mm-hmm.
How do we create a more holistic approach so we don't actually have all these people getting to the point where they're needing all of these services? But it's seems like it's very hard to, very small steps to get those changes to come in place.
Yes, and I don't know that we do. I think academia in particular and research is very slow. It
Yeah.
feels fast to the public because we see the headlines in the news, in a 30-second, 90-second news piece. So it feels like it moves quickly, but it really doesn't. You come up with a hypothesis, you test that hypothesis, and then you test and test and retest and try to prove and disprove, and then another study proves, and then another study disproves, and then you test it
Mm.
in a different way, and then you do studies of studies, and it does really move very slowly. I think the last I heard was that it's about a 7-year lag from bench to bedside, so meaning from research to clinical application.
Oh
And my
well.
hope is that AI will speed that up, but we're very, very conservative about applying new thinking, particularly in medicine. And it will be very interesting to see what happens when these older clinicians that we still have at the moment, when they start to retire. It'll be really interesting to see whether we close that gap a little bit because of AI and because of just more youthful doctors that are more embracing of technology. I'm very interested to see what happens from that perspective. But it just means that for us, that it takes a long time for it to trickle down to being applied to us. And I think we need to do better on that front. I think we need to speed things up a little bit, because there's really great work being done internationally. For example, and this is totally anecdotal, I don't have the study to back this up, but I was having a conversation with a psychologist the other day who was saying that in the UK, they have done some really great work on getting people with acute mental illness. So those reactive moments that you mentioned, getting them out of ED, because the emergency department is not the place for those patients. Yes, it's an emergency, and they go there because there's nowhere else for them to go. But they come in, they get assessed. Once they've calmed down a bit, they get sent on their merry way. And that's not good enough. But
Mm.
the
Mm.
UK apparently has done some really great work around investing some of that funding that would go to receiving them in the emergency department, which is hard for them, hard on the clinicians, hard on the system, and investing it much earlier into preventative therapy, creating places for them to go well before it becomes a total crisis. And they're having some really good results. And so I really hope that, with AI can come some speeding up of the data crunching that is required for governments to feel reassured and convinced that they can follow suit on successes like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you would have to think so, with AI, surely that will be one
Mm.
of the things that would come out of it. Um, how, in terms of looking at, I guess in your experience, being a carer, going through that whole process, how did you manage your mental health through that process and afterwards? Because I can imagine it's you know, it's a huge amount to take on. If you're feeling stuck, you're not alone. Most people don't realize how connected your mental health is to your body, from your gut to your sleep, movement, food, mindset. Getting active each day can shift how you feel, build confidence, and transform your quality of life. At Move Your Mind, we guide you through this process step by step. If this resonates and you want to learn more, simply go to my Instagram at Nick Brax and click the link on the bio to fill out an application, and I'll send you over more information about the program. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast. If you find the show helpful, please share it with a friend and follow me on Instagram. It really helps.
Yes, it was. It was huge. I'm mindful that I am now on the other side of that experience. So it's very easy for me to sit here and say, here are all of the things I wish I'd done. So I say them with the greatest love and respect to anybody who is in that situation, because I think if I had have heard somebody say some of the things that I'm about to say, I would have been like, shut up. You've got no idea how hard my life is on a day-to-day basis. And I think the same things apply to carers that apply to the rest of us. We need to be taking care of our physical health. We can't, and to me, there are a couple of big things that stand out on that front. One is that we know that exercise, and I'm preaching to the choir on this, I get it, but that exercise is by far the most powerful tool that we have when it comes to our physical health. If we could bottle it up into a pill, it would blow Ozempic out of the water. So exercise, really, it's not sexy, but it is the most powerful tool that we've got. Now, for many carers, primary carers in particular, they can't leave their person and drive to the gym and do a 45-minute workout and then drive home. That's not possible for them. So I guess what I would say to them is, but could you pull on your sneakers and walk around the block? And if you can't leave them for that long, can you pull on your sneakers and run to the letterbox and back? Or if you're living in an apartment, is there a stairwell that you could climb twice? That's one of the things that I would do when I was at Dad's and I felt like I couldn't leave him, was I would go up and down the stairs a few times. And, you know, it's not going to be a big, great workout where you're drenched in sweat and you've really got the endorphins going, but it'll give you a little dose of the good stuff, and it'll make you feel like you did something for your body that day. And I think that that's really, really important. I think mentally, things like practicing some sort of mindfulness. For some people, it might be meditation. I can't stand meditation, so that's not me. But it might be taking 3 deep breaths on the hour every hour. It might be washing the dishes and for that 1 minute, just focusing on the hot soapy water and the sponge and your hands, just for 1 minute. And your mind will not automatically go off to think about, I need to do this and fill in this form and haven't called that person back and all the things that our brain does. But if you can focus on flexing the muscle of bringing it back, I think that's really powerful. And it doesn't need to be a 20-minute or 40-minute meditation class. It can be as simple as taking 1 minute for yourself. So I think that's really, really important. The other piece is socially. Socially, I think we see carers, they get really disconnected, and we need to make sure that they are staying in contact with the people that they love. That's really important. So picking up the phone, sending a text saying, hey, I'm thinking about you, I care about you. And then the other piece is what I call spiritual well-being, which for some people might be organized religion, and for others might be chanting and chakras, and for others might be just some sense of who we are and why we're here. And I think the piece of that that's so critical for carers is having some sense of what life might look like in the future. And so that might be researching a course that you might want to do in the future so that you feel like there's something on the other side of this. Because when you're in it and you feel like, oh my God, this is my life now, and your life becomes very small very quickly. And so little things start feeling like really big things. And so having something that is for future you, maybe you've always wanted to learn to speak Italian. So you download Duolingo, is that the app that people use to teach themselves a new language?
I
Maybe
think
you
so. Yeah.
download that, and
Yeah.
for 2 minutes a day, you learn one new phrase. It has to be something for future you. Okay, so maybe you can't book a trip and go to Europe this year. That's not possible. But there will come a time that you can. And in the meantime, you can start, I don't know, researching Italian recipes or learning to speak a few phrases, whatever, a course that you've always wanted to do, a book on personal development that is teaching you skills for the future, something that is for you and your purpose and your reason for being. And with those four things, if somebody was to find, anybody could find 4 minutes, right? So if you could find 1 minute for each of those things every day, if I could have done that, I think I would have been significantly better off than I was at the end. And I was depleted, like seriously depleted at the end.
Hmm. Well, I think, yeah, that is such good advice. And like you're saying, no matter what the situation is, you can do something. Just get yourself moving, do a circuit, in the living room or something like that, or whatever it is. But I think the advice you're saying applies to everything. Like so many of us in general are just, you know, occupied by work and stress and family or whatever it is, and we don't make time for any of that. So
Mm.
it's just so important that we do think about that stuff, especially in the context you're talking about, because otherwise, if you lose yourself in the process, you're not going to be able to care for whoever it is as well as you ideally could. So yeah,
That's
I think
exactly
really good
right. And I
advice.
often think about momentum over motivation. So, a dear friend of mine taught
Yeah.
me this phrase about momentum over motivation. So, if you say on Monday, I'm going to start doing some exercise, and then Monday comes and goes, it's been a really long day, and it's now 7 o'clock at night, you haven't done it yet, and you're like, oh, you know what, whatever, tomorrow is the day. Then Tuesday comes, and your day gets totally knocked out by meetings. You've got an aging parent that you had to take to an appointment. One of your kids had a hard day at school. One of your kids was sick. Your day is totally knocked out. So you're like, okay, Wednesday is the day. Same thing happens on Wednesday. Come Thursday, you're like, stuff it. I'm going to start again on Monday. This week's too hard. This week's kicking my ass. Monday is the day. Whereas I think if on Monday you could have gone and stood in the lounge room and done 10 star jumps, 10 squats, and 10 crunches, and that was it, you would be like, tick. I ticked the box. Okay, I didn't go for a run. I didn't get to the gym. It wasn't major, but I did it. And then you've got momentum. It is so much harder
Totally.
to get a big, heavy steam train moving from a standstill. It takes so much activation energy to get that train moving. But on that day, on that Monday that you did those 30 little exercises that took you 2 minutes, 90 seconds, you budged it and it started moving. So on the Tuesday, when you go like, I did yesterday, I'm going to do today as well, you do something else, maybe 5 minutes, whatever you can manage, and it moves it a little bit further. And all of a sudden you've got momentum, and I have to be reminded of that. Like everybody else, I'm
Yeah.
as guilty as anybody else of letting it go. I had a really busy week last week, barely did any exercise. My book came out. It was a crazy week, and I could have done much better. But the day yesterday I got to the gym, and I did like 30 minutes, and I was like, well done, Casey. You did it.
Yeah.
And so if that's 30 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 seconds, doesn't matter. It's just the act of doing it and keeping that promise to yourself. And I think as carers, but for all of us, that is really powerful.
I think it's such good advice. It's so true. And every time you show up and do it, you're conditioning yourself that, I am the kind of person that shows up, and you build more self-esteem and confidence. And yeah, I think I love that approach. Like I always talk about, have your non-negotiables. So the non-negotiable things you're going to do, like you're talking about, I'm going to exercise on Monday, I'm going to do whatever on Tuesday, but don't make it non-flexible. So you're just going to do it. Maybe you plan to do an hour in the gym, and like you said, you end up doing a 2 minute workout in your living room, but make it absolutely non-negotiable that you'll just get it done in some capacity, and but with
Yes,
flexibility. And then, because otherwise, how do you can't build that momentum like you're talking about. So yeah, I love that
totally.
point.
And I guess I just want to say for people listening who are carers, exercise can feel like a bit of a novelty when you're like, especially when this is life and death stuff. Like, for example, my dad went into hospice for 2 weeks to try to get his symptoms under control, but we were very close to the end at that point. So he went in for 2 weeks, he came out and home for 2 weeks, and then he passed away. I wouldn't have at the hospice when I was there most days, most nights, all day, all night. Um, I wouldn't have been out in the hallway or the courtyard doing my star jumps. Okay, so like I get for anybody listening to this, I
Mm.
just don't want them to be sitting there thinking like, okay, cool, thanks, good advice. It is life or death stuff over here, and you're asking me to go wherever I am and do a little workout. So uh, please hear me when I say that I get it, and the exercise can feel like a nice to have. However, what I know and what we know, particularly where care drags on, and it can drag on, some people can care for years. I think a lot about, women with breast cancer and it gets diagnosed and then they are in remission and then a few years later it comes back and then they're in remission and this sort of cycle of hope and despair.
Mm.
It can go on for a really, really long time. And so the more days that you say, oh, well, I can't do it today because I'm at the hospice or I'm too tired or whatever. If more of your days become those days than the days where you go, as you said, you know what, this is my non-negotiable, it's happening even if it's 60 seconds, I think we then ourselves go into health debt. And health debt really worries me for carers because we are already so depleted, so exhausted. And, what we tend to see is that uh, the carer ends up with their own poor diagnosis or prognosis
Yeah.
because they are so
Yeah.
depleted from the care. Now, would that diagnosis or prognosis have happened anyway? Maybe. We don't know. There's no way of testing that. But certainly we see that women in particular, they drive themselves into the ground in order to care for the people that they love. And I know because I did it. I
Yeah.
was a shell of myself at the end of that experience.
Mm.
And I guess now looking back, I can see just how burned out I was. And in that moment, I felt like Dad has a finite time. I am young and fit and otherwise healthy. I can do this. And then towards the end, I had been white knuckling for so long that I, had driven myself into the ground in the process. And so if there is one thing that people listening take from me today, it's please, please don't do that. It is not worth losing yourself or your life in the process because once you are gone, then there is nobody left to look after them.
If you're feeling stuck, we get it. Most people don't realize how connected your mind is to your body. Sleep, gut health, food, exercise, it all matters. At Move Your Mind, we help you lose weight, build confidence, and reset your mindset in just 100 days. There's no extremes and no experience needed. We guide you to build simple habits and routines that will last for a lifetime. If this resonates and you want to learn more, simply go to my Instagram at Nick Brax and click the link on the bio to fill out an application, and I'll send you over more information about the program. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. If you have any suggestions for new topics or guests, please send me a DM on Instagram at Nick Brax. So a lot of our listeners are stuck in life and whatever it is they're doing, they're just feeling they've hit a crossroads, don't know where to go, what to do. Do you have any advice if you're in that position? What's like a first step you can take?
Yes, because I am a professional stuck person. I get stuck all the time, so I have to keep learning and relearning this lesson, and it is this: action cures inaction. So when we get stuck, we are stuck in the thinking about the doing. And what we need to do is just get stuck into the doing. We don't need the perfect plan. We don't need a 90-day strategy from ChatGPT. We need to take the first step, and then the other steps will make themselves apparent. I've heard lots of entrepreneurs talk about, like, what are the 3 things that I need to get done today? The 3 things that are going to move the needle. Don't worry about the 52 items on your to-do list. What are the 3 things I have to get done today, non-negotiable by the end of the day? And I think once you start getting in and doing the doing and you get out of the thinking, that helps hugely in getting unstuck.
Yeah, I love that advice. And it's like it is counterproductive. The feeling is counterproductive that it's the last thing you want to do when you're in that, but that's when you've got to just take that step, take that action. So
Yes,
great
agree.
advice. Okay, well, five closing questions. We finish every episode with these. First
Mm.
one, what is your best childhood memory that comes to mind?
I don't know if I could choose one, but I can certainly say that I grew up between my mum's house and my dad's house, so 50% of the time at each house. And I loved them both dearly, but they were very different upbringings. And at dad's house, I had lots of animals. I had a dog, I had a cat, I had a sheep for a little while, which we definitely should not have had. We lived in a very suburban neighborhood. I had budgerigars, I had rabbits, quails. So dad was sort of an arms open, let all of the animals in. And so to me, that felt pretty wonderful growing up in a house like that. I was just obsessed with animals. And when I see animals now, if I ride horses or even just find dogs to pat in the street, I do feel like that kind of reconnects me to who I was as a little person. So I don't know if I've got one, but certainly I'm grateful for that.
Love it. What do you think is the biggest burden on mental health in society at the moment?
I think the biggest burden on health more broadly, and certainly including mental health,
Hmm.
is equity. So, equitable access to services. So, using your example of mental health, you or I are in the really fortunate position that if we are struggling with our mental health, we have the health literacy and the knowledge to understand that that's what's going on. Then we have the wherewithal to reach out and seek some guidance, some counseling, some therapy, whatever it might be. And then we have the resources to be able to pay for that. And not everybody in the country that I'm in, the country that you're in, so Australia or the US, not everybody has that. And so I think that's a huge challenge that we need to do better at, significantly better at. So equity, I think,
Yeah,
is of huge concern.
such an important thing. What is your personal definition of happiness?
Mhm. I love the word happiness. I don't really subscribe to happiness. Happiness feels too vague to me, and I don't know if you've ever heard Tim Minchin says that happiness is like an orgasm. If you think about it too much, it goes away. And I think that
Yeah,
that's true. When we spend too much time chasing happiness, I think it sort of slips through our fingers. And so I'm much more interested in other positive emotions like joy and elation and contentedness. Those things feel really tactical to me. I understand when I'm in them, whereas happiness feels like too big an umbrella term. Certainly, I can tell you that when I am with my friends and we are laughing until we are crying, my stomach muscles hurt. Those are the moments for me that feels like true joy, true happiness. And so I covet those moments as much as I possibly can.
yeah. Nothing better than those moments. The belly
Yeah.
laughing. If you feel like you've lost control of your health, physically or mentally, Move Your Mind is here to help you. We guide you through weight loss, lifestyle change, and resetting your mindset without any extremes or overwhelm. If this resonates and you want to learn more, simply go to my Instagram at Nick Brax and click the link on the bio to fill out an application, and I'll send you over more information about the program. Thank you for supporting the podcast. If you find this show helpful, please share it with a friend and follow me on Instagram. It really helps. If you could give one piece of advice to your 18-year-old self, what would that be?
Stop drinking alcohol now. It took me until I was 40 to give up drinking alcohol, and I tried all the rules. I was like, I only drink on weekends. I don't drink during the week. I don't have more than two. I don't have more than 10 standard drinks a week. I space them with water. I only drink this, 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 and this. I only drink on special occasions. I tried for years, years, probably from when I was about 18 to give it up. I tried and tried. I'd go for periods, I'd have stints, and I was always better off for it. And then I would just eventually slip back in. And then I realized that when you just don't drink, there's no argy bargy with yourself or with anybody else. You just don't drink. it's like saying you either swim or you don't swim. It's not, I don't really feel like swimming. If you can't swim, then you don't swim. So if you don't drink, then there's nowhere for anybody or yourself to go in terms of that. So that is what I would give her. Her, that poor soul. She had so much pain to come from drinking and so many mistakes that she would make, that she would live to regret forever. Still now that I regret deeply, all made under the influence. So I would give
Yeah.
up alcohol then.
Yeah, I think I'll take the same one. And totally agree. Since quitting, it has felt easier just to quit than limit it to one or
Hmm.
two drinks or whatever else. Like you said
Yeah.
it, you said it well. So final one, what are you most proud of?
Hmm. I'm most proud of the fact that I have two small children, two little girls, and I always thought that I would be the kind of parent that would work full time and they would be in before and after school care. I was like determined for parenting to just fit into my life, this life that's very ambitious and aspirational and has big goals and wants to achieve big things in the world. And I am most proud that whilst there have absolutely been moments of that, admittedly, for the vast majority of that, I have really, really leaned in to parenting. I do every drop off, I do every pickup, I take them to dance, I take them to, OT and their like therapies that they need, to swimming. And I am really proud of that. I hope they're still little, but I really hope that there comes a time when they remember that I was there to drop them off, that I was there to pick them up, that I was there to do all of the things.
Mm,
And I hope that even if they don't remember, that they can feel it in their bones, that it has provided like a really secure attachment with me. Uh, and then it would be remiss of me to not say that I am really proud of the way that I showed up and cared for my dad, that I, you know, just jumped into action and that I walked him out in the way that he walked me in, and that I honored the love and the connection that was between us in caring for him during his toughest times. I'm really proud of the fact that I showed up for him and did that.
yeah, well, it's an amazing thing to have done. So thank you for sharing all of this and making the time. And I know our listeners will take so much out of everything you're talking about. So everyone listening, make sure to go to the links in the show notes, buy Casey's book. Where else can they go if they want to find more information about you?
I'm on Instagram at Casey Beros. I've got a website, caseyberos.com. And if you see me in the street or at an event, then please come up and say hello. I love hugs. I'm such a hugger. I give out more hugs than are probably wanted from people. So yeah, please come up and say hello. And if you are caring for somebody that you love, I'm sending you the biggest hug. It is a rough ride, and you're doing a really remarkable thing, and it won't be like this forever.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for making the time, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Nick.
And thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode and any suggestions for topics you'd like to hear about. Feel free to leave a comment or just send a DM. Your feedback is always appreciated. Please don't forget to click the subscribe button, leave a like or comment, share with your friends, and follow me on Instagram. It really makes a difference. Thank you so much.